women's suffrage movement was one of the most controversial and essential movements our country has ever been through. The movement was a colossal debate over the voting rights of women in America, which ended in the 19th Amendment in 1920, which bestowed women the right to vote. From about 1840 to 1920, the women's suffrage movement, one of the lengthiest debates in history, took place. Many suffragists fought for the right to vote and eventually prevailed. Heaps of notable events took place that changed the base of how America lived and eventually led to the 19th Amendment. In history, women have always been regarded as the lesser gender. Men viewed them as housewives, only fit to have children and cook. This all changed with the women's suffrage movement. But even before the suffrage movement, many women have stood up to the cruel laws that prevented their rights. One of the earliest notable women was Abigail Adams. In the 1770s, the Declaration of Independence was being drafted. John Adams was receiving multiple letters from his wife Abigail Adams, who was a firm believer in women's suffrage. In one of her letters to John, she proclaimed, "I long to hear that you have declared an independency, and, by the way, in the new code of laws which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire that you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could." Her strong words had little effect on John, who responded with nothing less than humor. Abigail's efforts were futile, and the Declaration of Independence was created with almost no attention to the females of America. Decades passed with little hope for women. They suffered for dozens of years with barely any formal resistance to the unfair laws that prevented them from voting. Finally, in 1848, the first Women's Rights Convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York. This convention was held to discuss and debate a declaration of sentiments, which outlined the voting disputes that women had. This convention was the first definitive start to the women's suffrage movement. Many important women, such as Elizabeth Stanton, who was the woman who drafted the Declaration of Sentiments, were at the convention. After 2 full days of diplomacy, 32 men and 68 women signed the Declaration of Sentiments, starting the famous women's suffrage movement. After the Women's Rights Convention in New York was held, many women were attracted to the resistance sparked by the suffrage movement. Among these women were extremely influential women who forged a reputation as leaders in the movement, such as Elizabeth Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. Both of these women had a fiery passion for women's rights. Their primary goal in life was to achieve voting rights through a constitutional amendment. The suffragist dream became reality on December 10, 1869. On that day, 21 members of the Wyoming legislature approved a revolutionary statement which proclaimed that every woman of the age of 21 years residing in this territory may at every election to be holden under the law thereof cast her vote. Suffragists in Wyoming stood in silence outside of Governor John A. Campbell's office until he signed the bill that became a law. It was a monumental moment in history. The next year, in 1870, a woman by the name of Eliza A. Swain received the honor of casting the first female ballot in Wyoming, proclaiming a new era of equality for women. Wyoming received much complaint about their acts, but the law was not repealed. In the same year, women made a bold move in Wyoming. They started serving in court as part of the jury. Esther Morris and Caroline Neal became the first female justices. Wyoming changed the course of the suffrage movement. That same year, in 1870, the 15th Amendment was passed. It stated, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States, or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude." Women were still unable to vote by this amendment, which stated nothing about the woman's right to vote. Enthused by Wyoming's bold move, the suffragists rested for over a decade. Little of importance happens until in 1890 the National Women's Suffrage Association and the American Women's Suffrage Association merged to form the National American Women's Suffrage Association, commonly known as the NAWSA. Given the idea of statewide suffrage by Wyoming, the National American Women's Suffrage Association began waging state-by-state campaigns to obtain voting rights in each of the states. Representing thousands of women nationwide, the National American Women's Suffrage Association wasted no time. In 1893, Colorado became the first state to pass an amendment which granted the right to vote. In no time, many other states adopted an amendment similar to this. Utah and Idaho followed Colorado in 1896, Washington in 1910, California in 1911, Oregon, Kansas, and Arizona in 1912, Alaska and Illinois in 1913, Montana and Nevada in 1914, New York in 1917, and finally Michigan, South Dakota, and Oklahoma in 1918. In the middle of all these statewide amendments being passed, President Thomas Woodrow Wilson was elected. In 1813, on his inauguration, the National American Women's Suffrage Association applauded a bold move to celebrate the many states that had granted suffrage so far. Led by Alice Ball and Lucy Burns, 5,000 to 8,000 suffragists paraded from the Capitol building past the White House. Many were in costumes, on floats, and on foot. At the front of the parade was a woman named Inez Milholland Boseven, who led the suffragists on her white horse. An estimated 500,000 spectators watched the parade instead of greeting their new president. A good few of them were on the suffragist side, but most felt that the parade was a disgusting insult to the United States. This is where everything went wrong. The crowd yelled insults, threw objects at the suffragists, mobbed, slapped, and even beat them. The organizers of the parade were not at fault. They had a police permit in order to march, yet the police did not do anything to protect them. 200 suffragists were injured that day. Although the injuries were terrible, the sympathy gathered from the parade generated more suffragists and support for the women's rights. The annual Women's Suffrage Parade started drawing more and more marchers and spectators. The year 1918 had support for suffrage. All of the jailed suffragists were released, and the arrests were declared illegal and unlawful. President Thomas Woodrow Wilson declared his support for the movement. In 1919, the necessary 2/3 votes in favor of the Women's Suffrage Amendment was finally obtained in Congress, and the amendment was sent to the states to be ratified. In August of 1920, the fight for women's suffrage was finally over. That year, the 19th Amendment, nicknamed the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, was sent to the states. All states had ratified the amendment except for Tennessee. A miraculous event occurred there, where it appeared the amendment might have failed by just one vote. 24-year-old Harry Burns was the last to vote. He had in his pocket a note from his mother urging him, "Don't forget to be a good boy. Vote for suffrage." He did just that. Women had finally won the vote for suffrage. The 19th Amendment states that the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. By this amendment, women finally had the right to vote in the United States without resistance. A war had been won by the suffragists. The most historical and debatable amendments had been added to the United States Constitution. The women's suffrage movement was one of the most crucial and influential movements that ended in the passing of the 19th Amendment. In history, this changed the lives of many women and men in America. Many women, such as Susan B. Anthony, dedicated their entire lives to fight for suffrage. Without this movement, life in history in the 1800s and early 1900s would have been much different. It changed the way we live our lives today. In the present day, women around the country have the power to vote in every election in America because of the brave suffragists. Not only that, but women are now an equal gender in everything. Women are able to work in places they could not work before, including the government. The women's suffrage movement was a truly astounding time period that remodeled the way the United States was for eternity.